In the streets of Constantinople, punishment was public and immediate. A reign where coffee could cost you your life, and the Sultan himself was believed to walk among his subjects in disguise, hunting for defiance. Public executions were routine. Coffee houses were shuttered. Alcohol and tobacco were banned. But if the common people lived in terror of Murad IV's brutal enforcement, what fate awaited those closest to him? When an 11-year-old boy ascends to the throne of an empire in chaos, what happens to the brothers standing beside him? Sultan Murad IV came to power in 1623, ascending to the throne at just 11 years old. Born on July 27, 1612, Murad was the son of Sultan Ahmed I and Kösem Sultan. When Ahmed I died in 1617, the empire entered a period of unprecedented instability. Mustafa I, widely regarded as mentally unfit, was placed on the throne, deposed, reinstated, and deposed again. He was followed by Osman II, who attempted to reduce Janissary power. In 1622, the Janissaries revolted and murdered Osman II inside the palace, the first time in Ottoman history that a reigning sultan had been killed by his own soldiers. By 1623, an 11-year-old Murad was placed on the throne. The Ottoman Empire of the early 17th century was a dynastic state that ruled across 3 continents. It claimed legitimacy as the successor to the Roman and Byzantine emperors, as the defender of Sunni Islam, and as the bearer of universal imperial authority. In Ottoman political theology, the Sultan was not simply a monarch, but God's deputy on earth. The survival of the dynasty was considered more important than individual lives, including those of the Sultan's own family. Earlier centuries had shown that civil wars between rival princes devastated the empire, weakening it against external enemies and internal rebellions. Preventing dynastic conflict was treated as a sacred duty of the state, even at extreme human cost. By Murad's youth, the empire was increasingly unstable internally, but it remained feared and respected by foreign powers. This made succession control not a matter of preference, but of survival. Murad had 4 brothers, all sons of Ahmed I and Kösem Sultan: Süleyman, Bayezid, Kasım, and Ibrahim. Under Ottoman succession law, every male member of the dynasty was a potential claimant to the throne. The Ottomans had developed 2 mechanisms to manage this problem: fratricide, the legal execution of rival princes, and confinement in the Kafes, or the cage. The Kafes was a secluded section of the imperial palace where princes were held under constant guard. Princes lived in isolation, denied military or administrative experience, their movements monitored around the clock. When Murad became sultan in 1623, all 4 brothers were placed in the Kafes. Süleyman and Bayezid would remain confined for 12 years. Kasım would spend even longer. Ibrahim would not leave until 1640, nearly 17 years of confinement from childhood into adulthood. Ottoman chroniclers, including Peçevi Ibrahim Efendi and Mustafa Naima, documented the conditions and psychological effects of the Kafes. The princes were cut off from court factions, denied contact with military commanders, kept under surveillance. They had no responsibilities, no training, and no purpose beyond survival. During Murad's early reign, real power rested with regents and court factions. Kösem Sultan exercised considerable influence. These years coincided with increasing instability, Janissary mutinies, provincial governors acting independently, widespread corruption. In 1624, the Safavid Empire captured Baghdad, exposing the weakness of central authority. By the early 1630s, Murad began ruling directly. Court factions were removed from power. Punishments became harsher and more frequent. Officials accused of corruption were executed. Soldiers accused of disobedience were put to death. Around 1633, Murad banned coffee and tobacco. Coffee houses were closed. Contemporary chroniclers recorded claims that Murad personally inspected order in the streets, sometimes in disguise. Whether literal or exaggerated, the belief shaped public behavior. As Murad consolidated control over the state, his attention turned toward the dynasty itself. Under Ottoman law, eliminating potential claimants was considered legitimate state security. In 1635, after 12 years of confinement, Shehzada Süleyman was executed. He was strangled inside the palace. There is no record of Süleyman engaging in political activity or plotting rebellion. His execution was preventative. Shortly afterward, Shehzada Bayezid was also strangled. The executions were likely coordinated to prevent rival claims. Sometime after 1635, Murad ordered the execution of Shehzada Kasım. The exact date remains uncertain. Kasım had spent even longer in the Kafes, confined since childhood with no political role. These killings narrowed the line of succession to a single living heir, Shehzade Ibrahim. Ibrahim had spent virtually his entire life confined in the Kafes. He had no education in military command, no administrative training, and no relationships with officials or factions that controlled the bureaucracy. Contemporary chroniclers describe Ibrahim as deeply paranoid, fearful of servants, and profoundly distrustful of court officials. He lived under constant expectation of execution, watching as his brothers were taken one by one. As Murad's reign continued into the late 1630s, his own health deteriorated. Despite enforcing alcohol bans, Murad drank heavily. By the late 1630s, he suffered from chronic alcoholism. Some later sources claim that Murad, on his deathbed, ordered Ibrahim's execution as well. Other historians argue that Kösem Sultan intervened. This claim remains contested, with no firm archival confirmation. What is documented is that Ibrahim survived and that Murad died before any such order could be enforced. Despite internal repression, Murad continued to project power abroad. In 1638, he personally led a campaign and recaptured Baghdad. In 1639, the Treaty of Zuhab stabilized the eastern border. Externally, the Ottoman state appeared strong. Internally, the dynasty had been reduced to a single surviving male heir who had spent nearly 17 years confined and psychologically broken. On February 8, 1640, Sultan Murad IV died at age 27 from cirrhosis of the liver. Shehzade Ibrahim ascended as Sultan Ibrahim I. Years of confinement left Ibrahim politically inexperienced and deeply paranoid. Court factions quickly reasserted control. The Janissaries returned to positions of influence. Central authority weakened, and the stability Murad had built through terror deteriorated rapidly. Ibrahim's reign was brief and chaotic, marked by instability, factional dominance, and Janissary resurgence. The centralized system Murad created quickly fragmented. Ibrahim was deposed and executed in 1648, just 8 years after taking the throne. All 4 of Murad's brothers were dead within 13 years of his accession. 3 had been executed by Murad's direct order. The 4th was killed by the unstable system Murad left behind. Murad IV eliminated his brothers to prevent dynastic conflict and preserve order. In doing so, he ensured that the next sultan inherited the empire after a lifetime of isolation and institutional decay. Süleyman, Bayezid, and Kasım spent over a decade in the Kafes before being strangled in the palace. Ibrahim spent 17 years confined before inheriting a throne he was never prepared to hold. Murad secured the throne. He recaptured Baghdad. He imposed order through fear. But he did not secure the future. The dynasty survived Murad's reign. The system he used to secure it did not.